Hello and welcome back to Jquery for designers. Jquery makes it very easy for us to access content elements within our page. And we can access those elements using CSS selectors. So we can very easily access the div element or the image element, or we can use class names and ID names in CSS to access those elements in Jquery. And in this lesson, we're going to discuss how to do that. Well, the files that we created in the last video in the Site01 folder are a good starting point for what I want to do here. So I'm going to go into our Site01 folder and duplicate it. And I'm going to rename it Site02. And then we'll open up that Site02 folder in TextMate or whatever your text editor of choice is. And I'll open up index.html as well as our site.js file. So our site.js file is ready to go. We already have our document ready function here, and all we need to do is to put our jQuery inside that function. But for our index.html file, we need to include some more items here in order to really see what's going on. So let's say that we have a couple of paragraphs here. So I'm going to jump over to a website called loremipsum.net, and I'm just going to grab some of this text here, copy it, and inside the body, I'm going to create an opening paragraph tag and then paste it, and I'll put a closing paragraph tag on the end, and I want to break this up into a few different paragraphs. So we'll come here and put a closing paragraph tag, hit enter to go to the next line and put another opening tag here, and then maybe down here we'll add another closing and opening paragraph tag. Oops, opening, there we go. And for the center paragraph tag, I'm going to add a class to it. So we'll just give it a class of second, since it's our second paragraph. So I'm going to save the file, and now that we've done that, I want to take a look at how we can point to these paragraphs in our jQuery in order to make something happen. So let's go to site.js. Again, we already have our document ready function set, and everything else we do here, we just need to put inside that function. Now we've already seen a small hint of how this works. Remember when we created our first document ready function, it looked something like this. We had a $, and then inside parentheses, we had document. And this syntax right here is how we're going to point to elements within our document. When we use the Word document here with no quotation marks around it, it's pointing to the document as a whole, as you might guess. But if we want to point to something specific within that document using CSS selectors, then we would simply put those inside quotation marks. So let's get rid of this here, and let's go inside our document ready function, and let's say we wanted to point to all paragraphs within our page. So the way we would do that is we first type the $, which is specific to jQuery, and then our opening and closing parentheses, and then inside those parentheses we're going to put a set of quotation marks, and inside the quotation marks we're going to put whatever CSS selector we want. Well, in CSS we can point to an element as a whole by simply typing in the name of the element, and if we're going to access the paragraph element, we're just going to type in the letter P there. So this will access all paragraphs on our page, and then we want to do something with it. Well, how do we do that? Well, in jQuery, we're going to string a bunch of jQuery functions together using dot syntax. So the way that works is after we select the element we want to access, we're going to type a dot or a period, and then we can call on another jQuery function to tell our browser what we want to do with those items that we've selected. So we've selected all of these paragraphs. What do we want to do with them? Well, let's say we want to alter the CSS of those items. The way we do that in jQuery is we type in CSS and then open and close parentheses, and then we type in the property that we want to change. So let's say we want to change the text color. So we need to put this inside quotation marks. So inside quotation marks, I'm going to type color, which is the CSS property we want to change. And then after that closing quotation mark, we'll type comma, space, and then again inside quotation marks, we'll type in the value that we want to change it to. So let's say we want to change the color of our paragraphs to red. So I'm going to use the hex value, pound F00, and then at the end of our line here, we're going to put a semicolon, and that's all we need to do. So what it's going to do here is it's going to access all paragraph elements on our page, and it's going to change the CSS or the specified CSS property of those elements. We're going to change the color property to red. So let's see if that works. Let's save our JavaScript file. And I'm going to open up index.html in Chrome. And we can see that our jQuery works. It accessed all of our paragraph elements and changed the text color of those elements to red. Very cool. Well, now let's jump back into jQuery, and instead of just pointing to paragraph elements, let's point to that second class that we created here. And so that class is just applied to this second paragraph element. So we can go back into JavaScript, and instead of p here, we're just going to type .second. And we'll leave the rest of the code as is. So let's save that, go back to Chrome and refresh our page. And now we can see that only that second item has those colors applied to it. Now just for kicks, let's say that we wanted all of our paragraphs except the one with the class of second to have red text. How would we do that? Well, there's another method or function in jQuery called not. So the way this would work is we would type in our first selector. So we want all paragraphs except for the ones with a class of second. So the way we would do that is we'd point to all paragraphs first, and then before we get to this .css property, I'm going to type .not, and then inside parentheses we're going to put the CSS selector that we want to avoid. So we want to avoid everything with a class of second. So again, make sure you put that .second inside quotation marks and those quotation marks inside parentheses. And so again, we're pointing to all paragraphs except for the ones with a class of second. And let's see if that works. We'll save that, go back to our code and refresh our page. And sure enough, now all of our paragraphs except for the one with a class of second have that code applied to it. So those are just a few different ways that we can access items in jQuery using CSS selectors. So as you can imagine, we can use IDs as well. So if this second paragraph was an ID instead of a class, which I like to try to avoid, but let's just say it was, then in our code we would simply use £second instead of .second, because that pound in CSS points to IDs. So we could save that and refresh our page, and you see it looks exactly the same, nothing changed. But I want to go back to using it as a class, so we'll just undo that there and save it. Go back to our HTML and undo that, change that back to class equals second, save our file. And again, those are the basics of accessing elements using CSS selectors in jQuery. So as we move forward, we're going to be using these CSS selectors a lot as we start applying effects to our content. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.